So, I don't want to start this video off with something that doesn't get straight to the point, but I have to. The previous video on the developer situation wasn't monetized out of respect for the people who'd been laid off before, literally only 24 hours earlier. There won't be a sponsor on this video for similar reasons, but I will have to monetize it. The future of Destiny as a franchise is something that every content creator vested in the game has been thinking of at the moment, and, well, we're all preparing for the worst. I'm sure you've already heard it from others such as Datto and Fallout and Aztecross. This is something that I have been thinking of as well. I am sorry to sound alarmist, normally I don't want to, but that's where we're all at mentally, so I'm terribly sorry that this video has ads on it, but I need to make sure that I am making money even if there is a terrible situation going on. I also wanted to use this opportunity to say that on Twitter I made a post about the layoffs, and I wanted to echo the sentiment that I made there. That post stated that if there were any developers who had new indie projects that had been laid off by Bungie previously, I wanted them to reach out and to allow me to use my platform to help. There is very little I can do to help any of the developers immediately after this layoff, but like many other content creators, I do have a large megaphone at my disposal, and I feel like this is the best way I can make use of it. If you're a Bungie dev, and you've been hit by this round of layoffs, and you're making a new project as an indie developer or part of an indie studio that has been formed in the wake of all this, please get in touch and let me know. I want to use my megaphone to give your game coverage if at all possible. I know that this is also something which is going to take time, so that is not an offer that expires at any point soon. It is something that I will be perpetually checking my business emails for. The expression that I overwhelmingly got from that post was that people would be interested if there were any other projects that were being created by the talented developers that Bungie had let go. With that in mind, I will be working to make sure I can give coverage to those studios where possible. Again, there is very little I can do individually to help this situation, but on a personal note, this is the first thing I've been able to say that's made me feel less than helpless. And if nothing else, it means that when the time comes, I may actually be able to use what I've built to help rebuild what has been lost. It is not a huge part that I can play, and it is something that is also easily self-serving, given that if people in my channel's vague proximity are interested in that content, I stand to profit as well. But I think it's one of those clear moments where both developers and content creators will sit there and recognize that there is a symbiosis that can happen. I would also like to point out immediately that if any of you try and pay me for initial coverage of a game, in this instance I would decline. I would make sure that I would do all of that for free, given that there is a hard enough time ahead for those of you who have lost your jobs and are now potentially at even greater financial risk. This is my public promise to you, with my word as my bond. With that being said, that's the mostly important stuff that I wanted to get out of the way at the beginning of this video, and now I want to talk about the actual topic. There's a quote that gets bounded about a bit, the origins of which aren't totally clear because it's attributed to multiple people throughout history in various different regions and from various different cultures. That quote is this: "Lead from the front." I think by now most of you are keenly aware of the situation that has unfolded in the last few days. Bungie's layoff of approximately 100 staff has been a body blow to both the company and the community, and with revenue falling 45% short of projections in the wake of Lightfall, it's clear that the situation is dire. On Thursday, the weekly Bungie blog post, aka the TWAB or TWID, was not released. Instead, a short statement came out from Bungie that said the following: "This has been one of the most difficult weeks in our studio's history, as we've parted ways with the people we respected and admire. We've spent this week supporting one another, including those who are at the studio, as well as friends and colleagues who no longer are. We want to acknowledge the feedback and concerns you have about Lightfall and recent seasons, as well as your responses to the reveal of the final shape. We know we have lost a lot of trust. Destiny needs to surprise and delight. We haven't done this enough, and that's going to change. To us, the path forward is clear. We need to make the final shape an unforgettable Destiny experience. We want to build something that will be regarded alongside the best games we've ever made, a fitting culmination that honors the journey we've been on together for the past 10 years. Forsaken, the Witch Queen, and the Taken King, These are the standard bearers we aim to live up to. We are intensely focused on exceeding your expectations for the final shape. Destiny 2 has more than 650 dedicated teammates pouring all their energy and expertise into delivering this epic moment and its subsequent episodes. In the weeks ahead, you'll be hearing more from us about what's next on the short-term horizon, beginning with our next season in late November. Afterwards, we'll begin to unpack our team's bigger, bolder, and brighter vision for the final shape, as well as the bridge we plan to build to take us all out of this darkness and into the light. See you, Starside, the Destiny 2 dev team. This message was seen by most of the community as a hollow response to the situation. There is, however, some nuance to be inserted here, and I think that a large part of it comes in here at the very end, with the note that it is signed by the Destiny 2 dev team. Now, at first I was confused that this wasn't signed by an individual, given that normally blog posts of any kind on Bungie.net are signed off by a staff member, be they a community manager, the game director, or even the CEO. The reason for that not being the case in this instance was something that was discussed extensively over on Twitter, with a variety of different suggestions, many of which might hold weight. There are certainly some ones that make a greater degree of sense than others. This is meant to be a statement on behalf of the whole studio, not just one person. Not signing it reduces the risk of any one individual being sent death threats and vitriol. It was probably carefully crafted by a PR team externally. Regardless of whatever the real reason behind this was, I realized that had it been signed, I might have had fundamentally different reactions and feelings about it, depending on who had signed it. In my mind, I realized that there were two places this might have come from if it was signed by an individual, and that's either from the community team or from upper management. If a community team member, aka one of the developers at Bungie, had signed this, I realized that I would have been far more sympathetic to it, given the clear grief that it expresses. Many Bungie devs have taken to Twitter to express how awful the day of October 30th was, and how awful they have felt in the aftermath. It is clear that after this, the morale at the studio is at rock bottom. You don't need special sources or any kind of strange insight to see that. It is human nature to know that that is the case. This was striking to me most of all, though, because I realized that if it was a community developer, one of the everyday frontline people at Bungie saying this on behalf of the whole company, I'd have individually believed this statement word for word had it come from them. Contrast that with how it would have come across if it had been deliberately signed by upper management, who would have probably invalidated the statement entirely by attaching their name to it. From one person, the statement would read as sincere and grief-stricken. From the other, it would have come across as hollow and tone-deaf. This is the crux of it all. Leadership at Bungie is lacking trust, not just from the community but also from their own development staff. And, more importantly, the reason why they're lacking trust at the moment is because they're not leading from the front. They are not leading by example, and they are not shoulder to shoulder with their fellow developers. 2 weeks prior to the October 30th firing spree, it was made clear internally at Bungie that Destiny 2 was 45% behind revenue targets. Pete Parsons announced that expenses would be cut and that the team would pull together to get it all done and to make Final Shape work, to get revenue back on track. This galvanized the studio, and from the sounds of things, employees were willing to work harder and to fight for the game that they loved to make. However, the layoffs then came afterwards, people were let go, and morale collapsed. To the best of our knowledge, nobody from the executive team has elected to cut their salary in the face of the tough times ahead. Note that whilst Sony mandated cost-cutting across many of its studios, it was Bungie who seemingly were able to choose how to make this happen. Bungie's executive team were the ones behind this. To the best of our limited knowledge, not a single member of Bungie's upper management took a cut in their salary or was forced to leave the company. However, they were willing to let go critical staff members, including the legendary Michael Salvatore, Hippie and Sam from the community team, Bianchi from the events team, Griffin from the social media team, and countless other talented developers both old and new across many disciplines. with some departments being utterly decimated and some being hit with only a few individuals leaving. The original designer of the Halo logo was let go. One of my friends who recently got into Bungie, Blue Jay, was let go. People who have been there for years were let go. What this has done is not only destroy any trust remaining between Bungie's upper management and the rest of the people who are invested in Destiny, either as developers or players, but it has also shown us that the company has a fundamental lack of leadership. This is a core problem that needs to be addressed. Upper management seemingly rejected calls from developers to add and improve things that were clear community requests in Destiny. Upper management set its unrealistic projections for revenue as we entered the most competitive year of releases in gaming's recent history. Granted, at the time being, those projections may not have been unrealistic, given that Lightfall had sold very well, but anyone who was in tune with the game's community would have quickly realized that a fall-off of players was not only likely, but inevitable. The failure to get projections right isn't something that Bungie's management should be let off the hook for. Upper management is seemingly responsible for a lot of what ails the studio and Destiny 2 itself, but they have not taken responsibility. Now, when I see the sign-off on that note of the Destiny 2 dev team, I do something that I probably should have done from the very beginning, which I've never done before, which is to differentiate the team into two groups. The day-to-day developers who are on the ground working hard to create the game that they love, working with the requests of the community, balancing things that need to go into the game, creating incredible stories, great music, fantastic art, and worlds that inspire us. And on the other side, the executive team, who at current are on a streak of getting in the way. This all speaks to a bigger issue that plagues the heart of all live service games that either fall on hard times or fail entirely, and that's that a lack of trust sometimes is enough to sink a game and a studio, because trust is the foundation of everything. It's a different video for a different day, but it is immediately relevant here and now. For now though, if Bungie's leadership wants to genuinely regain the trust of their developers, let alone the community, they need to lead from the front and join their development team in the metaphorical trenches. I am of course not suggesting that the CFO should start helping to design a Crucible map, or that Pete Parsons needs to sit down with the narrative team and write dialogue for a character, but I am suggesting that they need to show some leadership, some gumption. Leading from the front means being on the ground and helping shoulder the burden of things. That would mean taking a pay cut to help keep as many people in their jobs as possible. Leading from the front means clearly listening and acting on what people around you say they need. That would mean actually implementing the changes that developers have been begging to make for months or even years. Leading from the front also means being honest and taking responsibility for your own failures. That would mean admitting that the blame for these layoffs, the poor projections, and the state of the game ultimately lies not with the development teams who worked so long and so hard to make them and who begged to make those changes, but with themselves, the management team. It's only recently broken, but the latest news coming out of Paul Tassie's articles, which I mentioned briefly earlier, is that management supposedly looked at other ways of avoiding layoffs when cutting costs. When employees asked if one of them was executive compensation being cut, they were told no, and that it would not happen at the company. In the aftermath of this, Paul Tassie updated his reporting to indicate that certain executives did not take their annual bonuses, but the keyword there I would claim is bonuses. None of them have confirmed that they have cut their pay, and the dollar amount of bonuses that was given up for the year is unclear. If the executive team wants to right the ship and continue to keep the studio afloat, I would like to point out that the request for an executive of any level to cut their salary is not one that comes without precedent. Many seasoned developers will know exactly of what I'm about to speak of. For those of you who don't, do you remember the Wii U? You might not, because it really didn't sell well. This was the Nintendo device that was the predecessor to the Nintendo Switch. When the Wii U was selling poorly, the late president and CEO of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, made the near unheard of decision in Western game development to cut his salary in half so that nobody beneath him needed to be laid off. There are certain Japanese cultural things that imply that this was a choice that he was going to make, but his explanation for it actually has nothing to do with that. In 2013, 2 years before his death, he explained the decision by saying, "If we reduce the number of employees for better short-term financial results, employee morale will decrease. I sincerely doubt employees who fear that they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people around the world." Nintendo is hardly the paragon of business excellence, given that they have done plenty of less than stellar things to their employees in the past and the present. However, this move is exactly what leading from the front looks like. In the statement from the Destiny 2 development team, you can read the words, "We know we have lost a lot of your trust." Yet again, I can't help but hear those words from two different people. If a developer said those words to me, I sincerely would assure them that it was not the case that we had lost trust in them. If a member of Bungie's upper management said these words to me now, I would struggle to keep a straight face, as they pointed out the obvious in a hollow statement, something that does not ring true and that might even come across as a little insulting. If these words are sincere, and if Bungie's upper management wanted another chance even after giving no extra chances to those that have fundamentally enriched their worlds going forward, then they need to earn that second chance by earning back the trust of everyone, developers and community alike. But as sure as I am that the final shape will be a good if not great expansion, as sure as I am that the developers at Bungie will genuinely strive to give us a great product, the best thing that they can make, I am sure that Bungie's executive team will make no substantive steps to rebuilding our trust. All I can say now, with what meager power I have as a content creator and pundit for a game whose community and developers have felt as much like family as they have like colleagues and friends and clanmates, is this. Pete Parsons, if you want to regain our trust, prove me wrong. I am disappointed to say that I am almost certain that you will not do so. For more discussion on this topic, I'll be on the Friends Per Second podcast shortly after this video goes live. I'll be talking with SkillUp, Asdacross and Datto about the events of the last week and the future of both Bungie and Destiny. I hope to see you there. In the meantime though, my name is Bife. I'll see you soon.